Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. This is going to be a special supplemental episode of Adventuring the Game when it comes to Guacamelee. As you can tell from the title screen, I'm not playing the Super Turbo Championship Edition. I've gone back to the Gold Edition. Why? Well, because I played the Gold Edition a tiny bit just to make sure it was functional, as I planned to do this game as part of the series. And it kind of fell by the wayside for a while. And then, of course, the Championship Edition came out, so I've been doing that one, obviously, since I've got the first episode out. But I had played it enough to notice that there were already some significant differences. And so kind of what I want to do is take a look at the differences between the two, to kind of see how the game has evolved a little bit. So I'm thinking maybe I'll play both and do this supplemental half episode to show the differences between the two. So the first thing I'm going to focus on are the functional differences between the two games, and I'm actually kind of surprised at how different they kind of are in this regard. Let me go ahead and hit start, and we'll go into the opening screen here. Doesn't look too different. In fact, a lot of the same options are here. The extras are here, leaderboards and options. Of course, coming in here, let's make sure, all right. There are some things I noticed right away, like some of the changes here. The co-op bubble and the Intenso obviously are gone, because I did mention that those are things I knew that were added to this edition. The big thing that threw me off here, though, is this. You've got New Game and Continue, but you've only got one save at all. So if you have the game and you wanted to play it with a friend or something like that, they'd have to use your save. This is kind of surprising coming from a PC game, but originally was on a console, so that makes sense, because then you would have one save per profile on the console. So therefore, why would you ever need more than one save? So here, if I ever want to start a new game, I have to overwrite my save. I can't have a save where I'm through the game playing and exploring and maybe start over again to try and play it a little bit differently if I so desired. I couldn't do that. I'd have to completely erase my save. That's honestly, that sucks. It's not the first game to do that, so I can't really rag on it too much, but that was immediately the first change I noticed, and I'm really glad that that Super Turbo came out to change that. So beyond that, most of the things here are mostly the same. We're going to go ahead, of course, do lock the VSync. Thankfully, thank you to those of you who left feedback on the first episode. It looks like the tearing issue with VSync off did not show up in the recording, so that's good. That only affects me, so I'll go ahead and leave it off. But I noticed that the shaky video with it on was definitely an issue, so we'll go ahead and turn that off. And everything else, as you can see, mostly the same. So we're going to go ahead and go into the game, and we will let's just double check here. Yeah, assign controllers all the same. Alright, so we'll go into the game and we'll point out what I can see that is a little bit different as I go along. One of the first things I notice when starting up the game is the power-up required to find a secret inside of Juan's house has changed color. In Gold Edition, it was kind of a yellowish block. Here in Super Turbo Edition, it's now a purple one, and the sizes are quite different. This would imply that a completely different power is going to be used to unlock that secret. Of course, I haven't gotten that far to know which power that might be in either case. While minor, I did notice an update to the D-pad graphic when going through the doorway. I do think that the one in Super Turbo is a little easier to understand, as it actually highlights the part of the controller you're supposed to push, as opposed to an up arrow that indicates maybe you might go through this door. I don't think it's really hard to understand in either version, but I think the Super Turbo version is much cleaner. Leaving Juan's house, we can see that he's a little more festive this time around when it comes to the Super Turbo Edition. He's got Day of the Dead decorations around his house. Also, it looks like Juan's not much of a drinker in Gold Edition, as the barrels, well, let's assume that they're maybe tequila barrels. Maybe they're just explosive barrels in general. Maybe that's all they are. Barrels, de la explosives, I suppose. To the right of Juan's house do not exist in the Gold Edition. Furthermore, any barrels that do exist in the Gold Edition don't seem to have any kind of gold in them. This is something that was changed with Super Turbo. They were a little more generous with gold right away. Also, they made the opening here a little more lively, as well as there's chickens running around, as well as birds that fly in the background, which just didn't exist in the original Gold Edition. So they actually went kind of that extra mile to improve the ambience and just the aesthetic of the game, even from a simple level. I did notice that when going inside of houses, the parts of the screen that aren't important in the Gold Edition appear to really just be black backgrounds, so they're kind of plain. So it feels like there's just nothing here but the house. And this is a technique that really has been used before. There's nothing really there to see, so it makes sense. Okay, really, what do you need to see other than what's in the house? But when it comes to this first house, when there's very specifically an item that's mentioned and you more than likely have to get later in the story, it does feel a little disconnected. So it's nice to see that when Super Turbo Edition comes out, they added a slight texture, which you can hopefully see here in a YouTube video. You'll notice that there's actually some brick and mortar in a texturized around the border of the screen now, to make it seem like you're actually in the interior of a house, even if all that brick and mortar might actually never exist, at least that much of it, in a house like this. Well, this is only the first of signs to exist in the game. The sign on top of the Happy Ongo has definitely been changed. It goes from the Pollo Rojo, or the Chicken Red, Tequila, to Lucha Libre. It looks like several of these signs are going to be changed, and what I know of the Gold Edition is there is a lot of internet meme references that happened in the Gold Edition, and I haven't gotten far enough to see if that's changed yet in Super Turbo. So I just want to at least point this one out. Another odd change is that a person on the roof that mentions someone getting caught for stealing holy water from Frey is not there. It just doesn't exist, so that was just completely removed. Alright, I think we have here our first proof that a lot of the internet memes are going to be changed around in this version. So take a look at these two side by side. It really is the same picture. And the joke is kind of the same. It's cat versus frog, and they're both luchador. But what you might not get, especially if you're playing Super Turbo and you didn't see the words above it, is that this is the meme of Business Cat versus the Bachelor Frog. Two internet memes that were very prominent for quite a while. It could very well be that they just thought that these weren't as relevant anymore and decided to make it more of a generic joke. I had mentioned that they took out gold from the explosive barrels. This has been everywhere, not just outside of Juan's house, but even inside the house here that's just to the left of the Casa de Pollo. Inside this house, on the Gold Edition, rather than two explosive barrels that also happen to have not only health orbs, but gold, or pesos, I should really just call it pesos, but there was also a treasure chest. So what they did in the Gold Edition, rather than give you the gold in these barrels, they were just sitting in treasure chests. You break open the chest, and the chest would basically just contain the money for you. So what they've done is it looks like they've spread the money out a bit more, because when you got the gold, or the pesos, out of the treasure chest in Gold Edition, you got about 500 pesos. But in Super Turbo, you really didn't find that much right away. But this is offset by the fact that there are more barrels and more places to ultimately get pesos. But there's also less need for pesos, I've noticed, and I'll get to that later, in Super Turbo Edition. So they gave you a much larger sum in gold, but they spread it out a bit more in Super Turbo. I'm going to point this one out as it's kind of subtle, but I did notice it, and unfortunately I couldn't find any information on what this was about. But in Super Turbo Championship Edition, there's a little heart in Frey's church, just scribbled into the wall, that says RD, while this does not exist in the Gold Edition. A small but interesting change when Carlos Calica goes to kill Juan. The color in the Super Turbo Edition has been changed. It's also been given a nice glow effect to give it an extra spooky vibe. But as you can see in the comparison, it goes from a red color to something of a purplish color, or violet. I find this change to be fairly symbolic, as purple is typically used as a fairly regal color, but in some cultures it is also a color that can represent death, very fitting for this character and scene. A welcome change to Super Turbo Championship Edition is health bars above the enemies when you're fighting them in combat, which wouldn't occur in the Gold Edition, allowing you to have a better idea when you might be getting closer to being able to throw your opponent. The quest to corral the chickens inside the Casa de Pollo is the same in both versions. What's different is where you obtain the quest. In the Gold Edition, you're basically shown the quest immediately after leaving Frey's church. But in Super Turbo Edition, the quest giver is sitting right outside the Casa de Pollo. So it would seem that in the Gold Edition, they were trying to get you to notice the idea that there are quests in this game right away, whereas in Super Turbo Championship Edition, they want you to know where that quest is supposed to take place. As you're getting ready to visit the big city Santa Lucita, it looks like Super Turbo Championship Edition has decided to let you know that you're on the right path. Again, the game continues to impress with minor visual improvements added just for the sake of aesthetics. Here in the forest, one of the very first things you notice is a foreground waterfall just kind of going over your field of vision, slightly obscuring you and the enemies, not enough to be an issue. And this continues throughout the rest of the forest. A few other walls of water will be apparent as you're moving forward, and it just kind of adds a little bit of ambience. Not too much else to show off here other than Jaguar Javert has a slightly different color and aura to him when he does his shout that knocks you off the bridge. In the Gold Edition it is red, in the Super Turbo Edition it is kind of a purple color, again kind of like Gran Calica. And the last change as it comes to the levels that we've covered so far is that the save point for the Gold Edition is right at the bottom, right after you fall off the bridge, rather than in the next screen to the right. So just very minor placement change here. Let's talk about non-level changes. One of the first things I noticed when I got a chance to take a look at the upgrades and abilities that exist for Gold Edition versus Super Turbo Edition is that the prices are a bit different. And I also noticed that the prices for the pesos you get in Gold Edition are used for both your moves and for costumes, as opposed to Super Turbo Edition, which splits it up. Pesos are used for your moves, whereas silver is used for costumes. It's here in the store I also noticed that the moves I thought were exclusive to Super Turbo Edition, the suplex, boot, and pile driver, do exist in the Gold Edition, but you have to purchase them first. So in Super Turbo you are given these moves for free, rather than having to spend the 1,500 pesos. Overall, I'm very happy to see the amount of work they actually put into this. It wasn't simply just a re-release with a tiny bit of extra content. There is actually reworking of scenes to make the game feel better, as well as the extra level added. I thought it was only going to be just the extra level on top of what was already given out before, but there is a lot of work that went into making this game shine even more so than it already did. So ladies and gentlemen, those are the changes that exist from the two versions up to the point we've gotten to in episode 1 of Adventuring the Game. If you're interested in this, by all means, I'd like you guys to please let it be known, either by commenting, liking, or whatever, to let me know that this is the kind of stuff you'd like to see. I'm kind of interested in continuing this and checking out some of the other changes to see if I can highlight that. It might be a little more difficult moving throughout the game, but I will do my best to make it happen. Thank you very much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you next time.